The message popped up at 11:32 p.m., slicing through the silence of Marissa Blake's penthouse office. Mom, Sunday dinner. Big news from Daniel. Bring the tuition receipts. So proud of him. Marissa's hand hovered over the phone. She stared out the window. The Charlotte skyline stretching endless and glittering, cold against the black sky. Inside her office, a single lamp glowed over the pile of tax files she was still chipping through. Freelance returns after a 10-hour shift at the investment firm. She exhaled slowly. It was always the same. A family celebration she was expected to bankroll. A parade where Daniel played the golden boy and she, the reliable one, handled the check. Her cursor blinked on the screen. Her savings account balance stared back at her, a pitiful contrast to the glossy leather furniture, the polished oak floors, the art she'd picked out to look successful. Successful? Wealthy, even. In the eyes of everyone she knew, Marissa Blake had made it. She was the woman who drove a sleek black Audi, wore tailored blazers, lived in a high-rise that had valet parking, and yet here she was, at nearly midnight, alone in a silent glass tower, counting pennies to cover her brother's next tuition payment. From the hallway came the soft knock of Leah Moran's heels. Her best friend leaned casually against the doorframe, a coffee cup in one hand and a raised brow on her face. "You're still here?" Leah said, voice warm but edged with concern. "It's Friday night, March. Even the cleaning crew's gone." "Just one more client," Marissa answered automatically, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Leah stepped inside, setting the coffee down. She said nothing, just looked, really looked, at Marissa in a way few people ever did anymore. Past the designer watch, past the neat bun and pressed blouse, past the illusion. "You got another text," Leah said gently, nudging the phone toward her. Marissa swiped the message open. A second one from Daniel blinked up at her. Daniel, "Hey sis, BTW, my rent's due next week. You got me, right?" Same account. There it was. Casual. Assumed. Like breathing. Marissa shut the phone face down on the desk. "You know," Leah said carefully, "most people would be throwing themselves a party after working their way to $1 million portfolio by 32. You're over here funding someone else's life while yours—" She let the sentence trail off. Marissa laughed, short and hollow. "It's family, Leah," the old Southern saying. The excuse. Leah's mouth tightened. "Doesn't mean it has to cost you everything." The floor-to-ceiling windows trembled faintly under a passing gust of wind. Marissa could feel the chill seeping through the glass, cutting through the curated warmth of her office. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. She opened the drawer next to her. Inside, a thick manila folder labeled Daniel, tuition expenses. Rows and rows of receipts, wire transfers, credit card statements stared back at her. She ran her finger over the folder's frayed edge, thinking of all the promotions she'd turned down, the vacations she'd cancelled, the nights she'd stayed up until dawn, crunching numbers for freelance clients just to keep up. Her life had become a ledger, and somehow she was always the debtor. The elevator dinged down the hall. Marissa flinched, her heart tripping into her throat, before she realized it was just the night security guard making rounds. Leah pulled up a chair and sat across from her, folding her arms. "You know what the definition of insanity is?" Marissa gave a weak smile. "Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result?" "Exactly," Leah said, tapping the folder with one manicured nail. "Sunday dinner isn't just dinner, March. It's another withdrawal, another line item in the ledger." The word ledger hit harder than Marissa expected. She turned to the window again. Out there, 1,000,000 tiny lives moved, laughing, loving, free. Not one of them had any idea that behind this glass, a woman who seemed to have it all felt like she was drowning. Her phone buzzed again. "Mom, don't forget the receipts. Daniel wants to talk about his next steps." "Exciting." Next steps. Marissa felt the nausea rise. The next steps always involved her footing the bill. She pushed away from the desk, grabbing her coat from the back of the chair. "Where are you going?" Leah asked. "Home," Marissa said tightly. "I need to sleep before the big celebration." Leah stood too, resting a hand lightly on Marissa's arm. "You don't have to go." Marissa offered a tight smile. "It's just one more dinner." The lie tasted sour even as she said it. At the door she hesitated, her gaze falling once more on the city below. Somewhere down there, Daniel Blake was probably toasting another step in his charmed life. Maybe he was at a trendy rooftop bar, sipping an overpriced cocktail, laughing about how reliable his big sister was. And Marissa? Marissa would show up Sunday, receipts in hand, checkbook ready, smile pasted on, because that's what good daughters did, because that's what was expected, because the cost of saying no was too terrifying to calculate. She pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open with a soft chime. Leah's voice floated after her, quiet but steady. "One day, Ma," she said, "you're going to realize you're worth more than what you can give away." The elevator doors closed, sealing Marissa inside. She stared at her reflection in the polished steel. The tailored suit, the perfect hair, the tired eyes. The ride down felt endless. By the time she reached the lobby, the cold air slapped her awake. She crossed the marble floor in quick strides, the click of her heels echoing. At her car, she paused, gripping the handle until her knuckles whitened. She looked up at the night sky, searching for stars beyond the city haze. Nothing, just the endless hum of expectation. She slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine. Soft music filled the car, but it couldn't drown out Leah's words still whispering in her mind. "You're worth more than what you can give away." Marissa tightened her hands on the steering wheel. Sunday was coming. Another celebration, another sacrifice. But for the first time, a tiny voice inside her whispered, "What if it didn't have to be?" She pulled out of the garage and drove into the night, the city lights blurring like tears behind the windshield. And somewhere deep inside her, something cracked. Not enough to change everything. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, enough to start. The morning sun sliced through the blinds, casting sharp lines across Marissa's bedroom floor. She lay still for a moment, cocooned in the heavy silence, the weight of Sunday dinner looming over her like a storm cloud. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She rolled over reluctantly. Daniel. "Morning, sis. Just a reminder to bring all the receipts tonight. Also, thinking about looking at apartments near the hospital. Might need your advice. And maybe some help with the deposit." Marissa stared at the screen, her heart sinking. Help with the deposit? Of course. She tossed the phone onto the nightstand and swung her legs out of bed. Her feet touched the cold floor, grounding her to reality. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. In the kitchen, Leah was already awake, sitting at the breakfast bar with a cup of coffee and her laptop open. "You're up early for a Sunday," Marissa said, reaching for the coffee pot. "Couldn't sleep." Leah closed her laptop and studied her. "Big day?" Marissa offered a hollow smile. "The biggest." They sat in a heavy silence, the only sound the faint ticking of the wall clock. "Ma," Leah said finally, "you know you don't have to keep doing this. You don't owe them your whole life." Marissa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her cold fingers. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it is," Leah said softly. "Maybe you've just been taught it isn't." Marissa didn't answer. She couldn't. Not without shattering the fragile walls she'd spent years building. Her phone buzzed again. "Mom, excited to see you tonight. Pastor Reynolds is coming too. So proud of our family." Marissa blinked at the message, the knot in her stomach tightening. Of course Pastor Reynolds would be there. Another witness to her supposed generosity. Another reminder that family duty wasn't a suggestion. It was a commandment. She set the mug down, appetite lost. Later that afternoon, dressed in a navy blue sheath dress and sensible heels, Marissa pulled into her parents' driveway. The Blake house stood immaculate as ever, a pristine two-story in a manicured neighborhood where appearances were everything. The kind of place where people waved politely but watched even more carefully. She stepped out of the car, folder of receipts tucked under her arm, heart hammering. The front door flew open before she even reached the steps. "Marissa!" her mother called, enveloping her in a perfumed hug. "You look so beautiful, sweetheart. Come in, everyone's here." Inside, the house was buzzing. The smell of pot roast filled the air. The good china was set out, and the living room was crowded with familiar faces, family friends, neighbors, even Pastor Reynolds standing stiffly by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. And there, at the center of it all, was Daniel. He was laughing with Cheryl, his girlfriend, who was clinging to his arm like a designer accessory. Daniel looked every bit the rising star. White button-down shirt, expensive-looking watch flashing at his wrist, hair styled perfectly. When he spotted Marissa, he lit up. "There's my favorite sister!" She smiled tightly, letting him pull her into a one-armed hug. "Brought the paperwork?" he asked, voice low. Marissa lifted the folder slightly. "Perfect," Daniel grinned. "We'll go over it after dinner. Oh, and I might need your advice about something big." Marissa opened her mouth to ask what, but Daniel was already being pulled away by Cheryl, who gushed loudly about how incredible Daniel was for pursuing such a challenging specialty. Marissa drifted toward the dining room, trying to find a corner where she could breathe. Pastor Reynolds intercepted her, offering a firm handshake. "Marissa, your generosity is an inspiration. Truly, families thrive when the strong support the next generation." She murmured a polite thank you, stomach twisting. Across the room, her father was topping off wine glasses. When he saw her looking, he lifted his glass in a small salute. Expectation pressed against her chest like a boulder. At dinner, plates clinked, and polite laughter filled the air. Marissa picked at her food, nodding in the right places, smiling when necessary, all while the folder on her lap burned like a brand. Halfway through dessert, Daniel cleared his throat. "I have an announcement," he said, rising to his feet, glass in hand. "I've decided to specialize in neurosurgery." Applause broke out around the table. Marissa forced a smile, clapping along. "It's a tough track," Daniel continued, "but Dr. Shaw believes I have real potential. It'll mean extra years in residency, more intense hours, and unfortunately, not much time for part-time work." He paused, glancing meaningfully at Marissa. Her heart sank. "So," Daniel went on, "I'll need to focus fully on my studies, and Marissa," he smiled disarmingly, "you've been amazing, truly. I know I can count on you to help me finish strong." The table buzzed with murmured approval. Marissa's throat closed. She set her fork down carefully. Before she could speak, her mother leaned forward, eyes shining. "Your brother has a chance to be someone, sweetheart. Someone who saves lives. Isn't that worth supporting?" Pastor Reynolds chimed in. "Sacrifice is the mark of true character, Marissa. Your blessings are meant to be shared." Marissa looked around the table. So many familiar faces, all looking at her like she was the linchpin holding Daniel's future together. She glanced at the folder in her lap. The 4 years of sacrifices, the promotions declined, the vacations skipped, the quiet gnawing loneliness of building a life everyone admired, but no one truly understood. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Daniel," she said, her voice clear, "can we discuss this privately after dinner?" The table fell into a strained, expectant silence. Daniel's smile flickered, but he recovered quickly. "Of course! My brilliant sister, always thinking ahead." The rest of dinner passed in a haze. Marissa barely tasted the pie, barely heard the laughter. Her mind raced, heart pounding, with the knowledge that tonight something would shift, had to shift. After the dishes were cleared and the guests began drifting toward the living room for coffee, Daniel found her near the staircase. "Come on," he said, motioning toward Dad's study. We can look over the numbers." She followed him in, the folder clutched tightly in her hand. The study door clicked shut behind them. Daniel sat behind the heavy oak desk, gesturing for her to sit across from him. "All right, sis, lay it on me," he said, flashing his easy grin. Marissa placed the folder on the desk, but didn't open it. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye. "Before we talk about numbers," she said quietly, "I need you to understand something." Daniel leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "Okay." "I've given up promotions," she said, voice steady. "I've drained my savings. I've worked 2 jobs, all to make sure you never had to worry about anything except your future." Daniel's smile faltered slightly. "I know," he said, shrugging, "and I'm grateful. I mean it." "Gratitude," Marissa said, voice sharpening slightly, "isn't asking for more without even thinking about what it costs someone else." The air grew heavy. Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped. "Look, Ma, I get it. You're tired, you're stressed, but this is about investing in the future. My future benefits all of us." Marissa's hands curled into fists in her lap, nails biting into her palms. "I'm not an investment," she said softly, "and neither is my life." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but Marissa stood before he could. "We'll finish this conversation later," she said, gathering the folder. "But you should know, this isn't going to go the way you're expecting." She left the study without looking back, her heels clicking sharply against the polished wood floors, each step hammering home the truth she was no longer willing to ignore. Her life had been collateral for long enough. Tonight would be the beginning of something different. She could feel it rising inside her, a storm finally gathering strength. The next morning, sunlight streamed in harsh and uninvited through Marissa's bedroom windows. She sat on the edge of her bed, her head pounding with the weight of everything left unsaid the night before. The folder from the dinner, still unopened, sat on her nightstand like a taunt. Evidence of every sacrifice she had made, every sleepless night, every missed opportunity. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, thanks for hearing me out last night. We'll figure this out, okay? Let's talk later. Love you, sis." Marissa's stomach twisted. There was a casualness to his words that stung more than she wanted to admit, as if everything he asked was just a given, just part of the role she was supposed to play. She pushed the phone away and headed toward the kitchen where Leah was already clinking around with breakfast. "Morning, or whatever it's supposed to be after that," Leah said, handing her a mug of coffee without asking. Marissa took it with a grateful nod and sat heavily at the island. "You look like you barely slept," Leah added, sliding onto the stool across from her. "I didn't," Marissa admitted. "I couldn't shut it off. All of it just kept replaying." Leah sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Did he even apologize?" Marissa shook her head. "Not really, just assumed we'd figure something out, like it's still my job to patch the holes." Leah set her mug down with a sharp clink. "You're not a bank, Marissa. You're not a safety net. You're a person." Marissa smiled faintly. "Try telling that to my family." Leah opened her mouth to respond, but Marissa's phone buzzed again. Another text. This time from her boss, Eleanor Marsh. "Eleanor, quick coffee today. Want to revisit Boston offer? Big things moving." Marissa stared at the message, her heart giving a small, startled jolt. "You okay?" Leah asked. "Eleanor wants to meet today." Leah's eyes lit up. "About Boston?" Marissa nodded slowly, the possibilities blooming painfully against the walls she'd built around herself. "You have to go," Leah said, firm. "I know," Marissa whispered, voice cracking under the sudden wave of emotion. "And not just go," Leah added. "Go with open eyes, not thinking about who you're leaving behind, but what you're walking toward." Marissa gripped the mug tighter, anchoring herself. She thought of the sleek offices, the bustling city streets, the future that had once seemed like a guarantee before guilt tied her hands, a future that might still be waiting, if she was brave enough to reach for it. 2 hours later, Marissa slid into a booth at the corner cafe downtown, heart thudding against her ribs. Eleanor was already there, her dark hair pulled into a low bun, a crisp navy blazer framing her sharp confidence. "Marissa," Eleanor greeted her warmly. "I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," Marissa said, forcing a smile as she sat across from her. They ordered coffees, exchanged polite small talk, but Marissa could feel the tension humming under the surface. Eleanor was studying her, measuring, waiting. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Boston's still on the table," she said. "Senior position, 6-figure salary, company equity, full relocation package." Marissa's breath caught. "You're our first choice, Marissa," Eleanor continued. "But if you hesitate too long, the board will move on. They're hungry." Marissa swallowed hard, her mind spinning. "Boston is a big change," she said carefully. Eleanor smiled knowingly. "Change isn't the enemy, Marissa. Fear is." The words hit harder than Marissa expected. She looked out the window, watching a young couple stroll past, laughing, hands intertwined, so free, so unburdened. She thought of Daniel's expectant grin, her mother's tight smile, Pastor Reynolds' voice echoing, "Your blessings are meant to be shared," and then Leah's words, cutting through the noise. "You're a person, not a savior, not a wallet, not a shadow living behind other people's dreams." Eleanor's voice pulled her back. "The life you want, it's waiting for you. You just have to say yes." Marissa's hand trembled slightly as she picked up her coffee cup. "How soon would I have to move?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "End of next month," Eleanor said. "We'll handle everything." Marissa nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." Eleanor smiled, a glint of something fierce in her eyes. "I hope you do more than think." The meeting ended with a handshake and an open door. Marissa walked back to her car in a daze. She climbed inside, resting her forehead against the steering wheel. She could do it. She could leave. She could finally choose herself. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it. For the first time in years, she didn't want to be reachable. She drove aimlessly for a while, letting the city blur past, before finding herself parked outside a sleek new apartment complex downtown. A banner fluttered across the entrance. "Luxury living, leasing now." Without really thinking, she walked inside. The lobby was all marble floors and gold accents. A young woman at the desk smiled brightly. "Looking for a unit?" she asked. Marissa hesitated, then nodded. "Just browsing." The woman handed her a brochure. "One bedrooms start at $2,500 a month. Gorgeous city views." Marissa took the glossy pamphlet, flipping through photos of airy rooms and balconies overlooking the skyline, a future where her life was her own, her money spent on her dreams, her sacrifices for her growth, a life where she was the protagonist, not the background benefactor. Her phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. "Mom, dinner next Sunday too. Can you help Daniel look at some apartments after church? It would mean so much to us." Marissa's grip tightened on the brochure. In the reflection of the polished lobby glass, she saw herself, not the reliable sister, not the dutiful daughter, just Marissa Blake, alone, capable, still standing, and for the first time, maybe even ready to run. The apartment brochure rested on the passenger seat, untouched, as Marissa steered her car through the tree-lined streets back toward home. The late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows across the city she had lived in all her life. A city that suddenly felt too small for what she was starting to imagine. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Another buzz. Another. Finally, at a red light, she glanced down. Daniel. "Sis, Cheryl and I found a place. It's a little pricey, but so worth it. Need to put down first and last month's rent ASAP. Think you can cover it? We'll chat tonight." The light turned green, but Marissa sat there a second longer than she should have, cars honking behind her. She hit the gas hard, heart hammering. How had it come to this? When had giving turned into expectation? When had family love morphed into silent servitude? By the time she reached her apartment, Leah was already there, sprawled across the couch with her laptop open, snacking on trail mix like it was popcorn. "Hey," Leah called, "you survived coffee with the Queen?" Marissa dropped her keys onto the counter, her movements sharper than she intended. "Barely." Leah set the laptop aside and sat up. "Tell me everything." Marissa paced, the walls of the apartment feeling suddenly too close, too tight. "She offered the Boston position. It's everything. Higher salary, a real team, respect." "And you said yes?" Marissa hesitated. "I said I'd think about it." Leah stared at her for a long moment. "Marissa, I know," Marissa exploded, her voice cracking under the pressure. "I know it's everything I've worked for. I know I should be thrilled, but I can't." She cut herself off, chest heaving. "You can't what?" Leah asked gently. "I can't stop hearing them in my head," Marissa whispered. "Mum, Daniel, Pastor Reynolds, reminding me that good daughters sacrifice, good sisters give, good people don't just walk away." Leah crossed the room and gripped her shoulders, forcing Marissa to meet her eyes. "You are good," Leah said fiercely. "But being good doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm." Marissa swallowed hard, the truth of it hitting like a punch to the gut. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. "Mum, just heard Daniel and Cheryl found the perfect apartment. So proud. We know you'll help them make it happen. You're such a blessing to this family." Marissa's hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles ached. A blessing, not a person, a resource. She set the phone down with trembling hands. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. "You don't have to," Leah said. "But you have to choose." The doorbell rang. Marissa blinked, startled. Leah frowned, moving toward the door. "You expecting someone?" Marissa shook her head. Leah peeked through the peephole, then opened it cautiously. Standing there, a sheepish smile on his face, was a man Marissa hadn't seen in years. "Ben?" Marissa breathed. Ben Carter, her old college friend, the one who'd left Charlotte years ago to chase startup dreams in Austin, the one who had once made her laugh until her sides hurt, the one she had almost let herself fall for, before life and family obligations pulled her under. "Hey, Riss," he said, using the nickname only he ever had. "Leah said you still lived here. Hope I'm not crashing." Marissa's heart stumbled into an uneven rhythm. No, come in," she managed. Ben stepped inside, looking around with an easy smile. "Place looks great. You always did have good taste." Leah shot Marissa a wide-eyed look behind his back, mouthing, "What is happening?" Marissa shook her head slightly. Just as stunned, Ben turned to her, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. "I'm back in town for a few weeks," he said. "Visiting family. Thought maybe we could catch up." Marissa smiled before she could stop herself, something warm stirring in her chest for the first time in what felt like months. "I'd like that," she said. They sat and talked, Leah eventually slipping away to give them space. Conversation flowed easily. Old memories, new adventures, laughter that felt like breathing again. At one point, Ben leaned in, his voice dropping. "You always had the brightest future of anyone I knew," he said. "I figured by now you'd be running your own firm or running the world." Marissa laughed softly, but it caught in her throat. "I guess life had other plans," she said. Ben studied her a moment, his expression turning serious. "Or maybe," he said carefully, "you let everyone else's plans get in the way of your own." The words hit harder than they should have. Marissa dropped her gaze, tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "I'm trying," she said finally. Ben smiled, warm and patient. "Well, if you need a reminder of how capable you are, I'm around." The words wrapped around her like a promise. For the first time in years, Marissa felt the faint spark of something she thought she had buried. Hope. But even as she sat there, laughing with Ben, feeling the pieces of herself she had lost start to flicker back to life. Her phone buzzed again. A notification from Daniel, a photo of him and Cheryl in front of a towering, glass-walled luxury building. Daniel: "Just signed the lease. You're the best, Ma. Couldn't have done it without you." Marissa's chest tightened painfully. Ben noticed the change in her and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" Marissa forced a smile. "Yeah, just family stuff." Ben didn't press. He just nodded, like he understood more than she said. Later, after he left, after Leah grilled her for every tiny detail with giddy excitement, Marissa stood alone in her bedroom, staring at the message again. "Couldn't have done it without you." A celebration she hadn't even agreed to yet. She set the phone down carefully. Her reflection caught in the mirror across the room. The neat dress, the polished makeup, the strained sadness in her eyes. How many more dreams was she willing to sign away to fund someone else's life? And if she kept saying yes, who would she be at the end of it? The night air drifted through the cracked window, cool and sharp. Marissa closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would make a decision, one that was hers. And for once, she wouldn't ask permission. Marissa stood at the kitchen counter, staring blankly at the untouched cup of coffee in her hands. The apartment felt unusually still, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for her next move. Outside, the Sunday morning sun bathed Charlotte in soft gold, but inside her chest, a storm was brewing. She scrolled back to Daniel's text, rereading the words that had gnawed at her all night. "Just sign the lease. You're the best, Ma. Couldn't have done it without you. Without even asking, without checking, without caring." The door swung open behind her, and Leah breezed in, sunglasses perched on top of her head, holding a bag of croissants. "You look like you're about to throw that coffee across the room," Leah said, setting the bag down carefully. "What's up?" Marissa said nothing. She just handed over her phone. Leah read the text, her mouth flattening into a tight line. "He signed the lease," Marissa said, voice hollow. "He assumed." Leah's jaw tightened. "Marissa, you cannot keep letting them do this." Marissa wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of it pressing down. "It's not just Daniel, it's Mum, Dad, Pastor Reynolds. They all expect me to just be the solution." Leah crossed her arms. "And what do you expect for yourself?" Marissa opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out, because deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. The doorbell rang, breaking the tension. Leah shot her a questioning look. Marissa shook her head. She wasn't expecting anyone. Leah moved cautiously to the door and peered through the peephole. "It's Ben," she said, stepping back. Marissa's heart stuttered. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon. She wiped her hands quickly on a dish towel, trying to steady her breathing. She opened the door. Ben stood there, a coffee in one hand and a sheepish grin on his face. "Morning," he said. "I know it's early. I was grabbing coffee and thought you might want to escape for a bit." Marissa blinked. "Escape?" Ben lifted the extra coffee cup in offering. "I figured, brunch? Somewhere nobody knows your name. No expectations. Just waffles and bad diner coffee." Behind her, Leah cleared her throat loudly. "You should go." Marissa hesitated. Every fiber of her upbringing screamed that she should stay, that she should be available, that she should handle the latest family emergency. But another part of her, the part that had been asleep for too long, whispered, "Say yes." She grabbed her purse. "I'd love to." Ben's face lit up, and he held the door open for her like it was second nature. As they drove, Charlotte's gleaming downtown gave way to quieter streets, smaller diners tucked between aging brick buildings. Ben pulled into a faded parking lot beside a place called Sonny's, the kind of spot that still served pancakes bigger than your face and coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. Inside, the booths were cracked but clean, and the smell of syrup and bacon hung heavy in the air. They slid into a corner booth. Ben pushed the second coffee across to her. Marissa wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the simple kindness of it. "So," Ben said, leaning back against the vinyl seat, "what's going on?" Marissa hesitated, then shook her head. "It's complicated." Ben gave a small smile. "Marissa Blake doesn't get rattled easily. If it's complicated for you, it's serious." She stared into her coffee, weighing how much to say, how much to admit. Finally, she spoke. "I've spent the last 4 years paying for my brother's med school, his rent, his books, his car insurance, everything." Ben's eyebrows lifted, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "And now," she said bitterly, "he expects me to pay for his new luxury apartment because apparently being family means funding his entire life." Ben whistled low. "That's a lot." Marissa laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "It's everything. It's my savings, my future, my peace." Ben leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Why?" he asked gently. "Why did you say yes in the first place?" Marissa opened her mouth, then closed it. She had rehearsed the answer 1,000 times. Family, loyalty, responsibility, love. But sitting here, across from someone who looked at her like she mattered, not what she could provide, but who she was, the old answers felt hollow. "I guess I thought that's what love looked like," she said quietly. Ben's eyes softened. "Love isn't a transaction, Ma," he said. "It's not measured in dollar signs or sacrifices no one even acknowledges." The waitress interrupted with plates of food, pancakes, eggs, bacon, and Marissa realized she was starving. As they ate, conversation flowed easily, like slipping into a warm, forgotten river. Ben told stories about Austin, about starting his own consulting firm, about failing spectacularly the first time and laughing about it now. Marissa found herself smiling, laughing, remembering pieces of herself she had almost forgotten. When the plates were cleared and the check paid, they lingered in the parking lot, reluctant to end the morning. Ben turned to her, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I meant what I said," he said. "You're allowed to want things for yourself." Marissa nodded, the weight of his words settling deep inside her. "You're not selfish for choosing your own life," he added, voice low. "You're brave." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the rest of the world fell away. Marissa felt it, the possibility of something new, something real. But then her phone buzzed. Reality crashed back in. She glanced down. "Mom, are you free this afternoon? Pastor Reynolds would like to pray over Daniel's new apartment. We thought we could all gather. And maybe you could bring a check for the security deposit. Love you." Marissa's stomach twisted. Ben must have seen her face change because he stepped back, giving her space. "You okay?" he asked. Marissa forced a smile, slipping her phone into her purse. "Just family stuff." He nodded, but his eyes said he wasn't fooled. She hated that part of her wanted to cancel the prayer gathering, hated that she even called it that in her mind, as if it wasn't just another polite excuse to pin her against the wall until she agreed to pay. Ben hesitated, then said, "If you need backup, call me." Marissa laughed softly. "I might take you up on that." She watched him pull away, his taillights disappearing into the city. Then she leaned against her car, staring up at the cloudless sky. It shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't feel like choosing herself was the worst kind of betrayal. But it did, and tonight she knew they were going to ask again. Expect again, and she would have to decide if this was still the life she was willing to buy into, or if, finally, she was ready to walk away. The living room was set up like a ceremony, Marissa realized, the second she stepped through the front door of her parents' house. The good china, the fresh floral centerpiece on the dining table, the heavy aroma of baked ham and buttered rolls floating through the air, and in the center of it all, Daniel and Cheryl, seated like royalty awaiting their coronation. Marissa stood frozen just inside the door, the folder of receipts tucked under her arm, the security deposit check she hadn't written weighing heavily on her mind. Her mother bustled over, kissing her on the cheek, pressing a glass of sweet tea into her hand like a bribe. "So glad you could make it, honey," Mum chirped. "Pastor Reynolds should be here any minute." Marissa forced a smile and glanced around. Dad was setting up chairs. Cheryl was flipping through photos of the new apartment on her phone, tilting the screen toward anyone willing to admire it. Daniel caught her eye and winked. "As if we're all just playing roles," Marissa thought grimly. "And I'm still expected to play mine." She moved to the side of the room, near the window, sipping the too-sweet tea and trying to still the nausea rising in her stomach. The front door creaked open again, and Pastor Reynolds stepped inside, his hands folded, his face stretched into a solemn smile. "Shall we gather?" he said. Within minutes, everyone was seated in a semicircle. Marissa sat stiffly, the folder heavy in her lap. Pastor Reynolds opened with a prayer, thanking God for family unity, generosity, and the bright futures ahead. Every word felt like a pointed arrow aimed directly at her. "And now," Pastor Reynolds said, setting down his Bible, "Daniel would like to say a few words." Daniel stood, straightening his already perfect collar. "I just want to thank everyone," he began, voice polished and confident, "especially Marissa." He turned to her, smiling that boyish, heart-tugging smile he had perfected years ago. "You believed in me when no one else did," he said, voice thick with fake humility. "You made my dream possible, and with your continued support, I know I'll be able to focus entirely on my residency without worrying about finances." A few heads nodded approvingly. Cheryl dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, sniffing dramatically. Marissa felt the walls closing in. "Family sticks together," Daniel added, locking eyes with her. "No matter what." Pastor Reynolds clapped him on the back. "Well said, son." Mom beamed. Dad looked on proudly, and every eye in the room turned toward Marissa, expectant, waiting for her to smile, to nod, to agree, waiting for her to sign the check. Marissa set her glass down carefully, her hands steady even as her heart thundered. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze. "I'm proud of you, Daniel," she said quietly. Daniel smiled wider, already moving toward her, arms open as if anticipating a hug, and a check slipped between fingers. "But," Marissa continued, and the room stiffened at that small, dangerous word, "I think it's time we talked honestly." Daniel froze mid-step. The air grew thick, tense. Marissa opened the folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers, receipts, wire transfers, bank statements. She held them up, her voice calm but resonant. "Over the last 4 years," she said, "I have paid a total of $468,000 toward your education, living expenses, and lifestyle upgrades." Murmurs rippled through the room. Cheryl's hand flew to her mouth. Mom's face paled. Daniel laughed nervously. "Come on, Ma. That's family. That's what we do." Marissa didn't flinch. "Family helps each other, yes, but help implies choice, not expectation, not entitlement." Pastor Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I have missed out on promotions," Marissa said, her voice sharpening, "on investments, on building a future of my own because I believed helping you was temporary, because I thought after graduation you would stand on your own." Daniel's face hardened, the charm slipping. "You're making this ugly," he said under his breath. Marissa ignored him, lifting her chin. "And now you've signed a lease, without consulting me, without confirming if I was willing or able to support you further. You assumed—" Mom stood up, wringing her hands. "Sweetheart, don't do this here, please." "This is exactly where it needs to happen," Marissa said, her voice steady but full of quiet thunder. "In front of everyone who expects me to keep sacrificing without question." Daniel's jaw clenched. Cheryl looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. "I am not an endless resource," Marissa said. "I am not a bank. I am not the solution to every problem you create." Tears welled in her mother's eyes. "But we're a family." "A family supports each other," Marissa said, "not just the ones who take." She turned to Pastor Reynolds. "I respect your guidance," she said, her tone formal, "but God does not call us to destroy ourselves under the weight of someone else's choices." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Daniel stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "If you're not going to help me," he said, "then just say it." Marissa met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not going to help you," she said simply. Mum gasped. Dad's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't find the right words. Pastor Reynolds lowered his head, saying nothing. Marissa closed the folder and tucked it back under her arm. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't weighed down by dread. Instead, she was buzzing with nervous energy as she dressed for work. A simple navy dress, low heels, a touch of lipstick. She stared at her reflection for a moment before leaving, studying the woman looking back. There were still shadows under her eyes, still faint lines carved by years of holding too much for too long, but there was something else too. Strength, resolve, a flicker of the girl she used to be, the one who had dared to dream of building a life that was hers alone. "I wish you well," she said, meaning every word, "but my support, financial or otherwise, ends today." And then she turned, walked to the door, and left the stunned silence behind her. The late afternoon sun hit her face like a blessing as she stepped outside. Her phone buzzed again in her purse. She ignored it. For the first time in a long time, her hands didn't shake. Her legs didn't falter. She was walking into the unknown, yes, but she was walking forward. And she wasn't carrying anyone else anymore. The apartment was bathed in twilight when Marissa finally made it home. She dropped her keys on the counter with a hollow clatter and stood there for a long moment, breathing in the stillness, the silence after the storm. She set the folder down with a careful hand, almost as if touching it too harshly would shatter the fragile sense of calm she was holding on to. From the living room, Leah peeked around the corner, her expression cautious. "Hey, how'd it go?" Marissa laughed, not bitter, not angry, but exhausted. She sank onto the couch, the tension bleeding out of her shoulders in waves. "I did it!" she said, almost in disbelief. "I actually did it!" Leah's eyes widened. She grabbed a throw pillow, hugging it to her chest. "You told them no?" Marissa nodded. "In front of everyone. Daniel, Cheryl, Mum, Dad, Pastor Reynolds, all of them." Leah let out a low whistle. "You're my hero." Marissa pressed her palms against her face, the gravity of what she had done starting to settle in. "It was awful. It was liberating. I don't even know who I am right now." Leah scooted closer, lowering her voice. "They're not going to take it well, you know." "I know," Marissa said quietly. "They already haven't." Her phone lit up again on the coffee table. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, Mom, Dad, Daniel, even a message from Pastor Reynolds. She didn't open any of them. Instead, she grabbed the remote and muted the ringer, letting the world claw at the other side of the glass while she sat untouched inside. Leah reached over and squeezed her hand. "You chose yourself," she said simply. For a long time, they sat there, saying nothing more. Then, after a while, Leah nudged her. "You know what you need?" Marissa arched an eyebrow. "Please say chocolate and wine." "Chocolate, wine, and," Leah said dramatically, reaching for her phone, "a real plane." Marissa groaned, sinking deeper into the couch. "A plan sounds suspiciously like responsibility." Leah grinned. "Freedom comes with responsibility, babe. Let's map it out." Marissa hesitated, staring up at the ceiling where the city lights spilled against the plaster. Freedom. The word felt foreign on her tongue, untamed, terrifying, but it also felt right. She sat up, brushing hair out of her face. "Okay, let's do it." Leah pulled up a notes app on her phone and began. "Step 1, accept the Boston offer." Marissa bit her lip. I haven't officially said yes yet. Leah gave her a look. You think you burned this house down just to stay here cleaning up the ashes? A laugh broke from Marissa's throat, surprised and shaky but real. No, she admitted. Good, Leah said, tapping furiously. Step 2, find a new place to live in Boston. Marissa's chest tightened, but it was a different kind of pressure now, excitement tinged with fear. Step 3, Leah continued, give notice at your job here, set your move-out date and book movers. Marissa nodded slowly. Okay, that feels doable. And, Leah said, voice lowering into mock drama, Step 4, text Ben. Marissa's cheeks warmed. Leah, no, seriously, Leah said, serious now. That boy looked at you like you hung the moon, and you need people in your corner who see you, not use you. Marissa's heart fluttered unexpectedly. Ben. She hadn't let herself think about him all day, not while walking into that minefield at her parents' house. But now, in the quiet aftermath, the memory of his steady gaze, his gentle encouragement, resurfaced. Maybe she didn't have to walk this next chapter alone. She grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Before she could second-guess herself, she typed a quick message. Marissa, thanks again for brunch yesterday. You were right. Big changes are coming. She stared at the blinking cursor, wondering if she should say more, when his reply popped up instantly. Ben, I never doubted you. Want to celebrate tomorrow? My treat. Her breath caught. Warmth bloomed in her chest, fierce and unexpected. She looked up at Leah, who was watching her with open glee. That good, huh? Leah teased. Marissa smiled, a slow, genuine smile she hadn't felt in a long time. Yeah, she said softly. That good. The next morning, Marissa woke before her alarm. She slipped her resignation letter into her bag, feeling the sharp edge of its presence with every step. By noon she would have accepted the Boston offer. By the end of the month she would be gone. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Driving to work, she kept the radio off, letting her mind fill the silence instead. Memories of late nights, missed vacations, rejected promotions, all the tiny cuts that had bled her dry without anyone noticing. Not anymore. Today she was choosing herself. Today she was stepping off the stage they'd built for her. The one where she smiled and nodded and carried the weight of everyone else's dreams. And she was walking into the life she had almost forgotten she deserved. Her phone buzzed against the console. A text from her father. Dad. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Daniel is devastated. This isn't like you, Marissa. Please call. Her hands clenched on the steering wheel. For a moment the old instinct rose. The desperate need to fix, to smooth things over, to be the good daughter. But then she thought of Leah, of Benjamin, of the life waiting for her in Boston. And she knew. It wasn't that she had changed. It was that she had finally stopped pretending. She turned her phone face down and kept driving, the city unfolding before her like a map she was finally ready to follow. Somewhere ahead, the skyline shifted. New streets, new dreams, a new beginning she would no longer apologize for. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 22nd floor. Marissa adjusted the strap of her leather tote over her shoulder, the resignation letter tucked carefully inside. The walls of the investment firm gleamed under the sterile fluorescent lights, as if daring her to take back everything she was about to do. She stepped out, heels clicking on the polished marble floor, her heart a wild staccato beat inside her chest. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day. She caught her reflection in the glass wall as she walked toward her office. Cool, composed, determined. No one could see the storm she was fighting inside. Eleanor Marsh was waiting in the hallway, a cup of coffee balanced effortlessly in one hand, her sharp eyes catching Marissa the second she approached. "Got a minute?" Eleanor asked, already turning toward her corner office. Marissa nodded, following silently. Inside, Eleanor closed the door and gestured toward a chair. Marissa sat, fingers twisting around the leather handles of her tote. "You've been quiet," Eleanor said, studying her, "and I know you're not the type to waver once your mind's made up." Marissa swallowed. "I made a decision." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, giving nothing away. "I'm accepting the Boston offer," Marissa said, voice steady. For a beat, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then Eleanor smiled, slow and approving. "Good," she said. "Very good." Relief flooded Marissa so fast she almost sagged in her seat. "We'll need to move quickly," Eleanor continued briskly. "HR will need notice. You'll start wrapping your current accounts by end of next week, and—" Her voice softened just slightly. "You're making the right call, Marissa. Don't doubt it." "I won't," Marissa said, and meant it. By the time she made it back to her office, a small crowd had gathered around the break room, laughter spilling out into the hallway. Curious, Marissa detoured. Inside, a group of co-workers were huddled around a phone, snickering. At first she didn't understand. Then she heard Daniel's name. She froze. One of the younger analysts was reading aloud from a post. Daniel Blake. Big future neurosurgeon. Looks like his sister's been footing the bill, and he's been footing the nightlife tabs. More laughter. Another analyst chimed in. "Man, some people just don't appreciate a good thing." Marissa's stomach twisted. She stepped back quietly before anyone could notice her and hurried down the hall. In the safety of her office, she shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. It didn't take long to find the source of the gossip. On Instagram, Cheryl, Daniel's girlfriend, had posted a series of photos from their celebration at an upscale rooftop bar. Bottles, designer clothes, a caption that read, "Couldn't have made it without our favorite benefactor. Cheers to family loyalty. Blessed Chaktaj, grateful but not that grateful." The comments were brutal. Speculation about money, about Marissa. Someone had even tagged the local news gossip page. Her hands shook as she set the phone down. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. Public mockery. A sharp knock startled her. Leah poked her head in, concern written all over her face. "You okay?" "You look like you just got hit by a truck." Marissa forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "It's nothing." Leah stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "It's never nothing with you," she said softly. "Talk to me." Marissa slid the phone across the desk. Leah picked it up, her expression darkening as she scrolled. "Oh, they did not," she muttered. Marissa shrugged, pretending it didn't matter. "It's fine," she said. "Let them talk." Leah slammed the phone down. "It's not fine." Marissa looked away, blinking back the sting behind her eyes. "I chose this," she said. "I chose to stop funding their fantasy. If this is the price, then so be it." Leah's voice gentled. "You don't deserve this." "I know," Marissa whispered. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. That evening she met Ben for coffee again, this time at a cozy bookshop cafe on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and vanilla. He spotted her instantly, waving her over to a corner table. "You look like you've been through a war," Ben said, only half joking. "I have," Marissa admitted, sliding into the seat across from him. He ordered her tea without asking, chamomile with honey, and waited patiently while she collected herself. When she finally told him everything, the social media posts, the laughter at work, the heavy silence from her parents, he didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he leaned forward, voice low but fierce. "They don't define you," he said. "Not their guilt trips, not their gossip, not their anger." Marissa stared into her tea, the steam blurring her vision. "I know," she said, "but sometimes it feels like I'm losing everything." Ben reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "You're not losing," he said. "You're shedding." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "You're making space," he continued, "for the life you actually deserve." Marissa's throat tightened painfully. "And if you ever forget that," Ben added with a crooked smile, "I'll remind you as many times as it takes." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, laughing through the ache in her chest. "Careful," she said, voice thick. "I might start believing you." Ben squeezed her hand gently. "That's the point." The cafe lights glowed softly around them, cocooning them in a pocket of peace. For the first time all day, Marissa allowed herself to exhale fully, allowed herself to believe, even if just for tonight, that maybe walking away wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning. The next morning, Marissa woke to a sky bruised grey, heavy with the promise of rain. It mirrored the thick weight in her chest as she pulled herself out of bed and stared blankly at the suitcase she had tossed onto the floor the night before. The wheels were already in motion. The Boston apartment application was approved. Her resignation letter had been formally accepted. Leah had even started packing the kitchen for her, labeling boxes in her neat handwriting. Mugs, fragile, pots and pans, Marissa's new life. And yet, it still didn't feel real. She was halfway through brewing coffee when the knock came at the door. Sharp, impatient. Her pulse jumped. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door cautiously. Daniel stood there, rain misting his shoulders, his jaw tight with frustration. "Marissa," he said, pushing past her into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." Marissa closed the door slowly, bracing herself. Daniel paced like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. "I can't believe you," he said finally, voice low but trembling with anger. "I can't believe you'd embarrass me like this." Marissa folded her arms, steadying herself. "Embarrass you?" He spun toward her. "Everyone saw that post, Marissa. Everyone's talking about it. Cheryl's friends, the residency directors, even Dean Porter. You made me look like—" "I didn't make you look like anything," Marissa cut in sharply. "You and Cheryl did that all on your own." Daniel's face flushed. "You're abandoning me. Right when I need you most." "No, Daniel," Marissa said, her voice steady but shaking with suppressed emotion. "I supported you for years at the cost of my own life, my own dreams. What you're upset about isn't that I embarrassed you. It's that I stopped letting you use me." For a moment, he just stood there, breathing hard, staring at her like he didn't recognize her. Finally, he shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "Mom and Dad were right. You've changed." Marissa's heart twisted, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "I hope so," she said quietly. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then without another word, stormed out, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Marissa stood frozen, listening to the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. She sank onto the couch, the coffee forgotten, her hands trembling in her lap. The temptation to fold, to chase after him, to apologize even when she knew she had done nothing wrong, was overwhelming. She buried her face in her hands, willing the old reflexes away. She wasn't the villain for choosing herself. She wasn't cruel for refusing to be bled dry one more time. Still, the loneliness pressed in, thick and brutal. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from her mother. "Mum, we're disappointed, Marissa. Family means sacrifice, not selfishness." Tears burned the backs of her eyes. She thought she had prepared for this. She thought she was strong enough to withstand it, but nothing could have prepared her for how sharp it would feel, how final. Her thumb hovered over the phone screen, shaking. Slowly she set the phone face down. She wouldn't answer. Not this time. The front door opened softly behind her. Leah stepped in, her eyes widening when she saw Marissa sitting there, shoulders trembling. Without a word, Leah crossed the room and sat beside her, wrapping her arms around her tightly. Marissa leaned into her, letting the tears come. Silent, exhausted. "You did the hard thing," Leah murmured into her hair. "The right thing." "It hurts," Marissa whispered brokenly. "I know," Leah said, "but it won't hurt forever." They sat there in the growing dimness. the storm finally breaking outside, rain pattering against the windows. Hours later, after Leah made her drink tea and eat half a sandwich she barely tasted, Marissa sat curled on the couch, staring out at the rain. Her phone buzzed again. A different number this time. A short message. Dean Porter. Ms. Blake, I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you. It's regarding financial records tied to Daniel's residency application. Marissa stared at the message, a cold dread trickling through her veins. She read it again, slower this time. Financial records. Residency application. Her mind raced. Daniel had needed her sponsorship for med school, her co-signature on student loans, her notarized affidavits proving financial stability. Without her backing, he never would have qualified for certain grants or programs. If he had submitted anything recently, if he had used her information without her consent. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. Daniel hadn't just expected her to keep paying. He might have already crossed a line she couldn't fix. Her heart hammered in her ears. Leah noticed the shift immediately. "What is it?" she asked, voice sharp with worry. Marissa handed her the phone. Leah read the message, her face darkening. "Oh my God!" Marissa stood abruptly, pacing the room. "If he forged something," she said, her voice shaking. "If he used my name, my documents." "He committed fraud," Leah finished grimly. Marissa pressed her hands to her temples, trying to think. Dean Porter's message had been polite, formal, a courtesy. But it could spiral quickly. Her career, her reputation, her financial future, all vulnerable. She stopped pacing, meeting Leah's wide, worried eyes. "I have to talk to him," Marissa said. Leah stood too. "No, you don't. Not directly. Get a lawyer. Protect yourself." Marissa's throat tightened. She didn't want it to come to this. She didn't want the rift between her and Daniel to turn into a chasm lined with courtrooms and legal battles. But she also couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't shield him anymore. Couldn't keep paying the price for choices she didn't make. She looked down at her hands. Strong. Steady now. And took a long, shuddering breath. "I'll call Dean Porter in the morning," she said. "And then we'll see." Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and relentless. But inside, Marissa felt something new stirring. A resolve deeper than anger, a clarity sharper than guilt. This time she wouldn't fold. This time she would fight. For herself, for her future, and for the life she was finally, painfully, fearlessly claiming as her own. Morning crept into the apartment slowly, dragging pale grey light across the floorboards. Marissa sat at the kitchen table, her phone resting in front of her, untouched. The untouched cup of coffee beside it had long gone cold. She stared at Dan Porter's message again, tracing every word in her mind. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. Daniel had crossed the line. Leah padded into the kitchen, still wearing pajama pants and an oversized sweatshirt. She paused when she saw Marissa's face. "You didn't sleep," Leah said softly, grabbing a mug for herself. "No," Marissa admitted. Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Leah filled her cup, added cream and sugar like she always did, then slid into the seat across from her. "You ready?" Leah asked. Marissa nodded, though she didn't feel ready. Not really. But some choices didn't wait for you to feel strong. You just made them and trusted yourself to survive whatever came next. She picked up the phone and dialed. Each ring tightened her stomach into a harder knot. Dean Porter answered on the third ring, his voice crisp but not unkind. "Ms. Blake, thank you for returning my message," he said. "I appreciate you making time." "Of course," Marissa said, steadying herself. "What's this about?" Dean paused, and Marissa could almost picture him adjusting his glasses, measuring his words carefully. "There were discrepancies," he said finally, "in Daniel's recent residency paperwork, specifically documents relating to financial independence and prior sponsorship." Marissa gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Bank statements," Income verification forms, Dean said. Some of the documents list you as an ongoing financial guarantor. But when we cross-checked with public records, your recent filings suggest otherwise. A silence stretched between them, thick and sharp. I wasn't aware of any new sponsorship documents, Marissa said, her voice tight. I suspected as much, Dean said. Given your professional background, I assume you understand the seriousness of falsifying institutional forms. Marissa closed her eyes briefly, gathering herself. I understand, she said. We are conducting a formal review, Dean continued. If you have documentation proving your financial separation from Mr. Blake, I suggest you prepare it. I have everything, Marissa said quietly. Receipts, termination letters, bank account closures. I can send them immediately. Good, Dean said. The board will decide next steps once we complete the review. I appreciate your cooperation, Miss Blake. They hung up. Marissa stared at the blank screen for a moment, her heart pounding. Leah reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You did the right thing, Leah said. Did I? Marissa whispered. It feels like betrayal. Leah leaned back, folding her arms. It's not betrayal to protect yourself. It's not betrayal to stop someone from dragging you down with them. Marissa nodded slowly, but the knot in her chest remained. She spent the next 2 hours assembling everything Dean Porter had asked for. Every bank statement, every tuition receipt, every notarized affidavit stating she had severed financial ties with Daniel Blake as of 4 months ago. Each document felt like another nail in the coffin of the version of her life she had once been so desperate to protect. She hit send on the email, attaching everything, and then she sat back, numb. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ben. Ben, thinking of you today. Lunch later, no pressure. Marissa smiled faintly. Even across distance, he knew when she needed a lifeline. She typed back a quick reply. Marissa, lunch sounds perfect. I'll meet you. She needed to get out of the apartment, needed to remember that there was still a world outside of this collapse. By noon, they met at a small cafe near the city park, tucked away enough to avoid the weekday crowds. Ben stood when he saw her, his smile easy, his presence grounding. Hey, he said, pulling out her chair. Rough morning. You could say that, Marissa said, managing a laugh. They ordered sandwiches and coffee, and for a while, Ben let her talk. About the paperwork, the investigation, the way Daniel had cornered her at her own door. When she finally fell silent, Ben leaned forward, elbows on the table. Can I ask you something? He said. Marissa nodded. Have you ever thought about what you would have done if no one had ever asked you to be responsible for everyone else? The question hit her so hard she forgot to breathe for a second. She blinked at him, heart pounding. She trailed off, frowning. I don't know. Ben smiled gently. Maybe it's time you found out. Marissa looked down at her hands. They didn't look different. No magical transformation, no sparkles or fanfare, but they were hers. They had always been hers. It was just that now, finally, she wasn't offering them out to everyone else first. I want that, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I want to find out who I am without the weight of everyone else's expectations. Ben reached across the table, brushing her knuckles with his fingertips. Then that's exactly what you're going to do. After lunch, they walked through the park, the early autumn leaves just beginning to turn, gold, red, fierce, unapologetic colors. Marissa tilted her head back, letting the cool breeze wash over her. A few kids ran past, laughing. A couple strolled hand in hand. Life moved forward, oblivious to her internal upheaval. It made her smile, in a strange way, because the world wasn't ending. It was just changing. And maybe that wasn't something to fear. Maybe, just maybe, it was something to welcome. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Dean Porter, thank you for your quick response. We will be in touch soon regarding next steps. For now, Consider yourself cleared from direct financial liability. Mr. Blake's situation will be handled independently." Marissa stared at the words, barely breathing. Cleared. She was cleared. Ben watched her reaction, a question in his eyes. Marissa looked up, and for the first time in a very long time, she let the real smile rise. "I'm free," she said, laughing as the words tumbled out, shaky and brilliant and true. Ben grinned. "Told you." The breeze picked up, tossing her hair around her face, and she didn't bother taming it. She stood there in the middle of the park, sunlight breaking through the thinning clouds, and realized that for the first time in years, the future wasn't something she dreaded. It was something she was running toward. The evening air was thick with the scent of rain, and something sweeter. Possibility. Marissa sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, her resignation letter printed and signed. The flight to Boston was booked. Her new apartment was waiting. A clean white space ready to become whatever she wanted to build inside it. Everything was moving, and yet a knot sat stubbornly in her chest. Across the table, Leah sipped from a glass of red wine, watching her closely. "You're doing it," Leah said softly. "You're really doing it." Marissa smiled, but it was faint, distracted. "I know," she said. "It's just strange. Letting go of everything, of them." Leah leaned forward, setting her glass down with a soft clink. "You're not letting go of family," she said. "You're letting go of the version of yourself they needed you to be. The version that served them but starved you." Marissa looked down at her hands, remembering all the years those hands had written checks, signed loans, pieced together budgets late into the night, always for someone else. Always at her own expense. She thought of Daniel's face when she said no, of her mother's voicemails, her father's heavy silence. The space between them now felt as wide as an ocean, and yet for the first time she didn't feel like she was drowning. Her phone buzzed against the table. Ben. Ben. "Hey, big night tomorrow. You ready to celebrate?" A smile tugged at her lips before she could stop it. "Marissa, more than ready." Leah peeked at the screen and smirked. "He's good for you." Marissa shook her head, laughing. "You barely know him." "I know enough," Leah said. "I know he sees you. Not your wallet, not your usefulness. You." Marissa's heart squeezed at the truth of it. Ben didn't treat her like an obligation. He treated her like a choice, one he wanted to make again and again. The next evening, she met him at the rooftop garden of a boutique hotel downtown. Fairy lights strung overhead twinkled against the early dusk, and a soft jazz band played in the corner. Ben was already there, 2 glasses of champagne waiting. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made everything else, the fear, the sadness, the lingering guilt, fall away. "You look like freedom," he said when she reached him. Marissa laughed, surprised and a little breathless. "I feel like it." They clinked glasses, the crisp pop of bubbles matching the electricity in the air. "To new beginnings," Ben said. "To finally choosing myself," Marissa added, her voice thick with emotion. They sipped their champagne, the city skyline stretching out behind them, endless and alive. After a while, Ben reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "For you," he said, handing it over. Marissa blinked, surprised. "What's this?" "Open it," he said, smiling. Inside was a simple card, handwritten. "Congratulations on the beginning of your real life. You've earned every second of it." Marissa pressed the card to her chest, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. Ben stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek lightly. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You did this. You chose this." Marissa looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I was scared," she admitted. "I still am." Ben smiled, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "Brave doesn't mean not scared," he said. "Brave means you do it anyway." Tears slipped down Marissa's cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. She let herself feel it, all of it. The fear, The relief, the wild, aching hope. Tomorrow she would get on a plane. Tomorrow she would step into a new city, a new job, a new life. But tonight she let herself believe it was real. That she was real. That she was enough. Ben kissed her then, soft and certain, and Marissa let herself melt into it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't walking away from everything. Maybe she was finally walking towards something. Something that had been waiting for her all along. The airport terminal buzzed with quiet chaos. Rolling suitcases, last-minute announcements, the low hum of people moving from one chapter of their lives to the next. Marissa stood near the window, her boarding pass clutched in her hand, watching the planes taxi across the rain-slicked tarmac. She could see her reflection faintly in the glass, blurred and shifting, as if even the universe understood she was no longer the woman she used to be. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She hesitated, then pulled it out. A text from her father. "Dad, I hope you find what you're looking for. We're proud of you, even if we don't know how to say it." Marissa stared at the screen, the words blurring. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't a reversal of everything that had happened. But it was something. She tucked the phone away, her chest tightening around the complicated warmth and ache. "Flight 482 to Boston, now boarding." The announcement crackled overhead. Ben appeared at her side, out of breath from running through the terminal, holding 2 coffees and a crooked grin. "You didn't think I'd let you leave without proper fuel, did you?" he said, offering her a cup. She laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. "You're cutting it close." "Some things," Ben said, "are worth the sprint." They stood there for a moment, the city stretching out behind them, the future just a boarding gate away. "You scared?" he asked, his voice low. Marissa sipped the coffee, savoring the warmth, the steadiness of it. Terrified. Ben smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Good! It means you're doing something that matters." The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Marissa took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle fully inside her. This wasn't running away. This was stepping into. She set down the empty coffee cup and looked up at Ben, memorizing the way he stood there. Casual, certain, believing in her even when she faltered. "I'll come visit," he said. "Or maybe I'll find a reason to stay a while longer." Her heart flipped at the ease in his voice, the unspoken promise tucked between his words. "You don't have to," she said softly. "I know," Ben said. "That's why I want to." She swallowed the lump rising in her throat, smiling through it. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." He squeezed her hand, and for a heartbeat it was just the two of them, standing on the edge of everything new. Her boarding group was called. Marissa took a step back, then another, forcing herself not to look away from him. She wanted him to see this too, the woman she was choosing to become. At the gate she turned one last time. Ben lifted his coffee cup in a small salute, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Marissa smiled, tucked her hair behind her ear, and walked forward, boarding pass in hand, heart pounding with every step. Each footfall felt like a declaration. "I am not who you told me to be. I am not who you needed me to stay. I am mine now." The plane doors closed behind her, sealing the past on the other side. As the engines roared to life and the ground pulled away beneath her, Marissa closed her eyes, feeling, finally, fully, the lift, the freedom she had fought for, the life she had dared to claim. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel small or guilty or broken. She felt unstoppable. Boston smelled different, saltier, sharper, a constant whisper from the harbor that this was a place built by those who refused to stay still. Marissa tugged her suitcase behind her as she stepped onto the sidewalk outside Logan Airport. The air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. She needed the sting. She needed the proof she had really done it. The cab ride into the city felt like a dream. Skyscrapers jutted up into a crisp blue sky. Streets bustled with people who moved fast, talked faster, lived like the world was just waiting for them to claim it. Marissa pressed her forehead against the cold window, a strange knot of fear and wonder tightening in her chest. The cab pulled up in front of her new building, a modest brownstone tucked between a bookstore and a bakery that smelled like heaven even from the street. She tipped the driver, grabbed her suitcase, and stared up at the building for a long moment. This was it. Her new life. No more living in reaction to someone else's dreams. No more bleeding herself dry for the approval of people who only noticed her when they needed something. A soft chime sounded as she pushed open the lobby door. Exposed brick walls, worn wooden floors, a narrow staircase climbing up and away into possibility. She climbed 2 flights, keys clutched in her sweaty palm, and found her door. 3B. She unlocked it, heart thundering, and stepped inside. The apartment was small, but flooded with light, the hardwood floors gleaming, a simple couch, a tiny kitchen, a desk by the window overlooking the street below, her life condensed into one room, and for the first time in years, it was hers, only hers. She dropped her suitcase, crossed to the window, and opened it. The wind rushed in, cold and alive. She leaned out, breathing it in. A text buzzed in her pocket. Ben, made it safe? She smiled and typed back quickly. Marissa, I'm here. It's tiny. It's perfect. I'm terrified and thrilled. His reply came almost instantly. Ben, sounds like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. She leaned against the window frame, staring out at the busy street below. Her mind spun. Not with regret or doubt this time, but with the terrifying, electrifying knowledge that every decision from here on out was hers to make. Later that afternoon, she unpacked slowly, folding clothes into neat drawers, arranging a few books on the shelves. She hung one framed photo above the desk, a picture Leah had insisted she take. Marissa, standing at the airport with her suitcase, smiling that nervous, wild smile of someone who had decided she was worth choosing. As the sun dipped low and the city lights flickered on, Marissa sat at the desk, staring at the blank notebook in front of her. 1,000 possibilities tugged at her. She could build something new here, something real, maybe even something bigger than herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by another buzz from her phone. An email this time. Subject: Financial Ethics Inquiry. Update. Her stomach dropped. She clicked it open, bracing herself. Dear Ms. Blake, following our review, we wish to confirm that no financial misconduct on your part has been found. Mr. Daniel Blake has been informed that he is solely responsible for the discrepancies in his documentation. The matter will proceed according to institutional protocol. Marissa let out a long, shaky breath. It was over. The weight she hadn't even realized she was still carrying slipped from her shoulders. She wasn't tied to Daniel anymore. She wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess. She was free. Truly, fully free. Marissa stood up, walked to the kitchen, and pulled out the cheap bottle of wine Leah had snuck into her suitcase. She popped the cork with a satisfying thunk, poured herself a glass, and lifted it high. To endings, she whispered into the quiet room, and to every messy, beautiful beginning that comes after. She drank, the tartness blooming across her tongue, and laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that bounced off the bare walls and filled the tiny apartment with life. Tomorrow would come with new challenges, new fears, new risks. But tonight was hers, and for the first time in a very long time, Marissa wasn't afraid. She was ready. The first real cold snap of the season swept through Boston that week, crisp and biting, pulling scarves tighter and pushing strangers closer on crowded sidewalks. Marissa loved it. Every breath she took felt sharp, awake, alive. She wrapped her coat tighter around her as she walked the 3 blocks from her apartment to the cozy co-working space she had rented for herself, a small desk by the window. Nothing fancy, just enough room for her laptop, her ideas, and the future she was building one decision at a time. Inside, The space buzzed with quiet energy, the clack of keyboards, the low murmur of conference calls, the occasional hiss of an espresso machine from the corner cafe. Marissa slid into her seat, booted up her laptop, and opened the project that had been forming in the back of her mind ever since she boarded that plane. A non-profit. Small at first, focused on financial education for young adults aging out of foster care, or those cut loose by families that treated support as conditional. She knew what it felt like to be tethered to obligations you couldn't afford, emotionally or financially. She wanted to build a place where people could learn how to stand on their own before someone taught them they were only as good as what they could give. The idea scared her, which was exactly why she knew she had to do it. She sketched out the first outline, losing herself in the rhythm of creation, her fingers flying over the keys. A message pinged into her inbox around noon. Ben, thinking about you. How's the new empire? Marissa smiled, biting her lip to hold it in. Marissa, tiny empire, one desk, one dream. But it's a start. Almost instantly. Ben, the best things always start small. Proud of you. She leaned back in her chair, letting the warmth of those words sink deep. Later that evening, as she packed up her laptop and pulled on her coat, her phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't Ben. It was an email. Subject, Community Volunteer Request Curious. Marissa opened it. It was from the local community center, just a few blocks away. They were looking for volunteers to host basic financial literacy workshops for teens. Her heart skipped. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't groundbreaking, but it was exactly the kind of thing she wanted to build her life around now, real help for real people. Without hesitating, she clicked reply. I'm interested. When can we start? The reply came back quickly. Orientation next Thursday. We'd love to have you. Marissa tucked her phone away, a slow smile spreading across her face as she stepped into the cold night air. The city stretched out before her, alive with lights and movement, and somewhere beyond the blur of headlights and hurried footsteps, her future waited, not handed to her by family expectations, not dictated by anyone else's needs or dreams, her own. She thought of Daniel, back in Charlotte, facing the consequences he had spent so long outrunning. She thought of her parents, still trying to understand the daughter they had lost, or maybe the one they had never really known at all. A pang of sadness fluttered through her chest, sharp and bittersweet, but it didn't stop her from walking forward, because sadness wasn't the same as regret. She could mourn what she had lost and still move toward what she was gaining. The streetlights flickered above her, casting long golden pools across the sidewalk. Marissa tucked her hands into her coat pockets, tilted her face into the wind and smiled. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing, and she would keep choosing every messy, beautiful day ahead. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way.